appreciate your being there. My guest today is Pam Openshaw. She has been on the air with me before, but there's several things hopping up and down and going on that I wanted to get her in here today to talk about. So I'm going to just start right out with asking Pam to share with you who she is and what last Saturday was about to her. And she is a state delegate for the Republican Party, and we've got so many issues, and we're going to try and jam them in here really fast for you. But if you are interested in politics, if you're interested in what's happening in our country, if you're interested in the election, if you are interested in the truth, call up some friends and share with them, because that's where we're headed. Okay, Pam. Now, I know Pam quite well because she is a neighbor and a good friend, and she's been on before. We're not going to cover all that. We're going to cover new stuff, but just for everybody's information, you are a constitutionalist. Is that how you put that?
Well, probably. I study the Constitution a great deal. I am absolutely in love with the Constitution. I'm in love with the Founding Fathers. I find it a very exciting topic. I don't know if I would describe myself as a constitutionalist, because to me that means that someone would be able to say to you, okay, this piece of legislation has come up. How does it pertain to the Constitution? And that individual would be able to give you detailed information about how it pertains to the Constitution. I don't know if I can go that far with it, but I know a lot and believe a lot and believe I have some information to share.
Okay, let's start right out. As I said, then I called her a constitutionalist. Now she's described why she isn't, but now I want her to tell you why she is so interested in the Constitution and why we all should be.
In the past history of America, we have been a very prosperous nation. We've been a very free nation. We've lost a lot of that prosperity, and we've lost a lot of our freedoms. If we want to go back to having that prosperity and back to having those freedoms, we need to go back to our original Constitution. Right now, the Constitution that we have has been very badly altered on some key points. If we don't fix those key points and go back to our original document, which was an inspired document given to us by God, we will not be able to regain our prosperity. We're looking at all of these problems right now with the economy, with the excessive government regulation, with the fact that jobs are flying out of the country. Those all tie back to the Constitution and what has happened to the Constitution, and we aren't going to fix them. Nothing is going to fix them until we fix the Constitution. Everything we try is going to be a Band-Aid on the balloon.
And that's really what it is. It's a Band-Aid on the balloon and can be burst at any moment. All right, we're going to try and do this in a little bit of order and fashion. So we're going to start because I was interested. We've had Lisa Shepard on Friday afternoons from 6 to 7 with Republican Andrew Holmes running for the Senate. He lost by 2 votes to Bramble. Is that right?
Yes.
And I don't quite understand how he could lose by so little. I'd have been recounting, but apparently, tell us a little bit about what happened, and then we're going to take on the Hatch problem, or not, and the Obama birth certificate, which has taken a huge turn last week and then immediately plowed underground.
Thank you. That was a good way to state that. It has been plowed underground. But to go to the convention this past Saturday on the 21st, we had the state Republican Party convention to determine who our representatives are going to be. And our candidates, and I was a delegate to the state convention. We began the morning with a vote for those of us in our district, Kurt Bramble and Andrew Holmes. There were only about 130 people present for that vote. Those were the delegates that covered that district. And so out of that 130, we cast paper ballots, so there's no opportunity, and it was all done right in front of us, no opportunity for any kind of mischief going on there. And when they totaled the votes, the policy in the state of Utah is that you have to get 60% of the vote at the convention in order to prevent going to a primary. And Kurt Bramble cleared that number by 2 votes. Actually by 1 vote, because had there been 2 more votes cast for Andrew Holmes, it would have taken us into a primary situation. And it would have been a good idea to go into a primary situation because it would have given the people of Utah the opportunity to hear from both of those candidates. As it was the state delegates that heard from those two individuals. And we were the ones who voted to determine what the rest of the people of Utah would be allowed
So
to.
you were a neighborhood representatives and then on up the line to the state. Okay.
Yes.
And so now, you made some comments to me earlier that Andrew had given
He did.
a really good talk.
He did.
His 6 minutes. They were each given 6 minutes, and he made points that were very,
he
very
did.
good.
He did.
So I don't think we should forget his name. I think there is going to be a time for him. He's been on the air here. He's a decent person, knows his stuff. Quite a strong personality in his own, but very pleasant.
He does, and I would love to see him emerge into some kind of a position of authority in the future because he is a good man.
Good. Then let's talk about Hatch a little bit. Now, I need to say this in defense because we've already had a discussion. In defense, I met Orrin over the years because I worked at the Chamber of Commerce for many years here in Utah County. It was the Provo-Orem Chamber, and the offices for Chris Cannon and for Orrin Hatch were right directly above our offices in the old courthouse building in downtown Provo. So we're always bumping into each other, and we knew him. And, of course, we sat sometime at the same table at Chamber of Commerce luncheons and so forth. And then I went on a public affair communications mission to Washington, D.C. South, which was Northern Virginia, which is where he and his wife and family lived and have lived for years and years. And he goes back and forth between a home here and a home in Virginia since he's there in Washington all the time. And I found him to be a very nice person personally. I didn't ever open my mouth anything about politics because I never had time to stand there and get involved with it as a missionary. When I came back, I did see him and have heard him and, of course, have read about him. And I've heard others now bring up comments that have made me question because people do change. Sometimes they're influenced by strong personalities, sometimes by the machinery, and sometimes just pure and simple by money, and sometimes pure ignorance. So with having said that, and with that as a backdrop, I'm going to let you make your comments because you're coming from a different place and greater knowledge. So I'm interested in what you have to say, and enough so that I wanted to share it this morning. So if you have comments, we do have a chat room. If you'll come in at UtahValleyLive.com. Actually, you can come in at pat.UtahValleyLive.com. There's a chat room right under the monitor or under the picture of us, and you can just send us your comments. We'd love to take a look at them, and we'll comment on your comments.
Well, thank you for giving me that opportunity. I do have some things that I'd like to say about the situation with Orrin Hatch. Again, under this rule that in the Utah system, you have to take 60% of the votes in the convention in order to avoid having a primary. Orrin Hatch got 59.19%. Had he gotten another 32 votes, there would not have been a primary. As it is, Dan Lillenquist now will be running against him because he got just over 40% of the votes. Let's talk about the situation with Orrin Hatch.
And I don't know Lillenquist except vaguely.
I've met with him several times. I'm impressed with him. I think he's a good man, and I think he has a lot of really good things that he can do back in Washington, D.C. Orrin Hatch, as a freshman senator, and in the beginning of his career in the Senate, was a very, very powerful voice for freedom. He was a good man. He defended the state of Utah very well. He defended constitutional principles well. He was very much a conservative. Here's the problem. Over time, in order to make anything happen in the Washington, D.C. area, or in order to advance what it is you want to advance, you have to compromise. And you can compromise only so far before you have compromised away the principles that you were sent there to represent. And that is what has happened to Orrin Hatch.
Do you think he's taken it too far?
He has been in office for 36 years. Here's an interesting principle. The first time that you were elected to an office, you were elected by the people that you are proposing to represent. Every time thereafter, you are elected by special interest groups.
That's true.
And the longer you're in office, the more interest groups there are. That's one of the reasons why we don't want to send people back to Washington, D.C. and have them be there for 36 years.
Is this just a loss of control?
More than a loss of control, I think it's an adopting of the mentality of compromise. Now, if you think about compromise, let's say that I take a field of action, and I've got the left and I've got the right, and I decide that I'm going to compromise within that field. I believe what the principles that are being taught on the right, and the principles that I do not believe are the principles being taught on the left. Every time I compromise, it moves me closer to those principles on the left that I don't believe in. And if you compromise over and over and over again, you end up over on the left when what you were supposed to be believing in and what you originally believed in was on the right. I believe that that is what has happened with Orrin Hatch. He has simply lived in an environment of compromise and dealt in that environment for so long that he has reached the point where he is compromising on things that matter way too much and that are taking away our basic freedoms. I do not decry the fact that he is a good man. That is not the point. He is a good man. It's just that it's our responsibility as citizens of the state of Utah and of the United States of America, it's our responsibility to supervise the individuals that we send to office. And if we begin to supervise what Orrin has done, he has gone to the left way too many times.
Give me a for instance.
All right. Obamacare. I think pretty much everybody hates Obamacare, at least in the state of Utah.
If they don't hate it, they don't understand it, and they're afraid of it.
That's right. You cannot possibly know very much about that law without believing that it is a very massive infringement on our liberties. But in order to get Obamacare passed, they had to pull some shenanigans. They had to do some game playing in Congress in order to get that passed. The precedent for those games was set by Orrin Hatch and Senator Ted Kennedy in 1993 when they passed what is called SHIF, which is a policy that gives government insurance to children in underprivileged families. They were the ones who figured out how to and drafted this system of twisting and distorting the political system in order to get your bill across. If they hadn't done that with Schiff in 1993, Obama may very well have not been able to pull it off when he used it to pass Obamacare in 2007, 8. 9, whatever it was.
So they, in other words, Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy set that up.
They pioneered the precedent, yeah.
At the time, was it the right thing to do?
I don't think so. The basic principle that you need to understand about government is that the more the federal government is involved, the less freedom the individual has. The more the federal government is involved, the more you have a political system that embraces socialism. So you want to keep the federal government out to the highest possible degree. Now, what happened? Well,
I guess that I would think that Orrin would do that.
Well, he did in the beginning. And I'm going to give some defense. I'm going to tell you what he says about this SHIFT program. He said, well, when we passed it, it was a program for the states, and then the federal government stepped in and took it over. I'm saying to myself, excuse me, Senator, but you have been in Washington, D.C. at that point in time for close to 15 years. If you haven't figured out that the federal government is going to step in and take a program like that when you open the door, then you really shouldn't be there. So I don't think Orrin's defense of himself by saying, oh, it wasn't my fault the federal government stepped in and took it over. No. You don't pass the law and give the federal government the opportunity to do that.
But they did.
And now, of course, we have Obamacare, but there are other things. There's he voted for the TARP bailout, which was the bailout of Wall Street. He voted for the bailout of the auto industries, the two auto companies. But now, again, I'm going to tell you what it is that Senator Hatch says about that. He says, no, I didn't vote for that. And then the organizations that are watching him and monitoring him come back and say, oh, yes, you did. Let's explain why that can happen. Actually, both of these individuals can be right, both entities. When Orrin Hatch says, I didn't vote for those, he can be right. In a technical sense, he can be right. When these freedom organizations step forward and say, yes, you did vote for that, they can also be right, because this is why. There are several votes involved in order to make the process happen. In order to get it from small committee to large committee, to get that passed and get it onto the floor of the Senate, you have several votes. So an individual who is trying to make his record look good but it isn't really behind the program, can vote for a massive government program in the preliminary voting, and then when it gets to the floor of the Senate, if you know that it's not going to pass, you can then step in there and give your vote for the opposite, and it makes it look like you were taking a conservative stance when in reality, in the background, you weren't. And there's a lot of game playing that can go on, and that is what's going on in this situation with Hatch. There have been games played, and then he steps in and he says, I'm a conservative, but he isn't really. He's drifting away from it. Actually, if you take a look at his record, there's a percentage of his record that has been very conservative, and there's a growing percentage as he moves further and further, as he's there longer and longer, there's a growing percentage that becomes liberal. And most people are stepping back and saying, oh, but he's conservative most of the time. Yes, that's true. He's conservative most of the time. But on the things that really matter, on the things that really hit the pocketbook, he is voting for the liberal agenda. But I would ask you, Pat, you and I are both parents. All right. Would you have ever hired a babysitter for your children that was really nice to them 70% of the time and that beat them the other 30?
No,
100%.
You want 100%.
So you don't send somebody back to Congress who's voting the conservative issue part of the time.
Some of the time.
And the liberal issue the rest of the time, especially when the liberal votes that you're giving involve massive amounts of money and massive increase of federal powers.
So what has happened to him? Is it power?
I don't know. As I said, I think he's a good man. I just think
misguided.
Here's what Dan Lillenquist says. I really like his idea. He says, I'm like a pickle in a pickle barrel. He said, if you take a cucumber and you dip it in and out of pickle juice, in and out, in and out, in and out, you can do that 1,000 times and you're still a cucumber. But if you take that cucumber and you stick it in the brine and you leave it there, it becomes a pickle. And that is his analogy, his symbolism to express to us the fact that you can stay too long. And really, that's my take on it. I think he's been a good man. He's done a lot of really good things. It's just time to bring him home. And by the way, he does not own a home in the state of Utah.
Well,
he hasn't.
I said that, and then I know that he hasn't. He's in Virginia.
He's in Virginia.
Yeah. You also made some comment about the socialism thing is a little scary to me, actually.
Yeah.
And maybe the fact that he has been there too long. Mm-hmm. And but we grew up with the word compromise. From the time you're little, they take toys away and say, find a way to compromise with your brother or sister. And I have to believe he's tried to compromise. So I don't quite understand all of the issues that he has voted for. I don't understand some of the things he has said. But I'd like to think he's on the right side of right. But I'm hearing something different, so maybe we all need to take another look. And maybe that's why I'm having Pam here today. I'm speaking with Pam Openshaw. You're on the Pat Sheranian Hour on Monday. We thank you for being here. If you have a comment, come in on pat.utahvalleylive.com and tell us what you think. So this was a good issue, the whole thing. Tell me about Lillenquist just a little bit. I think I know him from somewhere down here, and I can't remember where I know him from.
He's Dan Lillenquist, and he's been a member of the Utah State Senate. And he's done some really good, really effective work while he's been there. He's been a one-term senator. And he's been, very
See, right
involved
away,
in
I
that.
think, does he have enough experience?
I know, and we all ask that question. What he has done very powerfully. You always have that question, do you have enough experience? But if you'll go back and take a look at where Orrin Hatch was when he first came in 36 years ago,
he didn't have any experience.
He was in the exact same position. Right. And he was a very powerful individual. Early on, he did some really, really good things for the country. He was staunch and stalwart. I am not knocking Orrin Hatch. I am just saying it's time for a change. I believe.
And Lillenquist, you think, is the guy?
Well, he is the guy because that's your only option at this point in time. It is now a primary between Dan Lillenquist and Orrin Hatch. So what we had before doesn't matter because now it's
out on the table, and it's going to be those two.
Yeah.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left, and we've got to comment on this. Probably 2 years ago or more, not long after Obama was elected, or we heard of his name, I remember getting an email that said, this person is not a citizen of the United States, therefore he cannot be eligible. Well, of course, it was longer ago because he was elected then. But then I kept getting emails and lots of proof and more proof and more proof. And then every time there would be a new birth certificate, somebody would say that's a counterfeit. Well, the one thing they can't change is the fact that he's using a stolen Social Security number of somebody who is dead and gone, and issued in a state where he has never lived. So there is that issue. But you've got something happened last week that really rang a bell with all of us, and the media just shoved it away. And now the powers with money and power have moved in, and this is what happened to the birth certificate.
Yes, I'm very concerned about this issue. The Constitution states that in order for an individual to run for the office of president, he has to be a natural-born citizen. The definition of a natural-born citizen is this. He has to be born on American soil. He has to have, both parents have to be American citizens, and he has to have done nothing between the time of his birth and the time of the election to disqualify himself as a citizen of the United States. All right. Obama produced a birth certificate basically phoning that information up. This past week, the state of New Jersey has declared a week or two ago that they would not put Obama on the ballot for the national election because he is ineligible to run because he is not a citizen of the United States. That case has gone to court, and last week in court, Obama's attorneys admitted that the birth certificate has been falsified. And they say that because
the one that he's using,
the one that he has offered, the long document that he offered to the American people as an authentic, is a phony, and they have admitted that in court. And they are now saying that because it is a phony, it cannot be used in court as evidence against him. And I'm standing there looking at that issue, and I'm going, you've got to be kidding me.
So it's not the real thing. It's a phony, but they can't use it against him.
I cannot believe. So what that means is that knowingly and willingly, President Obama lied to the American people. He is not a natural-born citizen of the United States. He should never have been president of the United States. You have the state of New Jersey who's picking up on this. And so I'm going on the media looking for this, and I'm not finding it on the media anywhere. It's on the web, but it's not on the media. Every news outlet in the country should be putting this issue forward and broadcasting it. This is an impeachable offense against the President of the United States.
And when you said this to me this morning, I thought nobody is ever going to let this happen because there are too many people that will be fools. They will have been made a fool of, and they're not going to lose face over this issue. And someday somebody may get him, but he'll be out of office when it happens. But we should at least be aware of it.
Well, I think we've got to do more than that, because here's the problem. If we as the American people flagrantly allow this total and complete abolition of the principles of the Constitution to stand without doing anything. I agree,
but what can one person do?
You start speaking up. Now, this is the concept of state laboratories, Pat and I were talking about earlier.
50 state laboratories.
Yes. The way the Constitution is set up, the states are given a great deal of sovereignty and a great deal of independence in order to be able to operate. That sets them up as individual state laboratories. They can bring forward information. They can try new programs. They can adapt. They can do all of these kinds of wonderful things that can be examples to the federal government on how to deal with problems. They can also address specific issues. This should be addressed on a state level. The state of Utah should do what the state of New Jersey has done and say, whoa, this is not right. And they should step in and say, we are not going to allow this to stand. We in the state of Utah are going to protest this and let that movement spread to the rest of the country.
Have you talked to Gary Herbert?
I have not. I only found out about this late on Saturday night and found out more about it this morning just before you and I talked. I plan to be talking to Gary Herbert, and I plan to be talking to my representatives in Congress as well. Every individual listening to this broadcast needs to get to your representative and say, what's the deal with this? State of Utah, act. Do something.
Somebody's got to. And why not start here? because I think we love truth. I know all people say they love truth, but I'm willing to dig for it.
I hope
On
so.
this issue, I totally agree with you, concur completely. We need to go to a commercial break, and I have a guest that's coming down from Evanston, Wyoming. I'm not sure if he's here or not. If he's not, then Pam and I are going to continue. In any event, Pam has been on the air, I think this is the third or fourth time, and we're looking for sponsors for her. If you would like to be a sponsor and bring her on and talk more about the real issues, the real stuff, and have real opinions, I'd like her to do her own show and bring guests in, have a panel, and really shake it up right here in Utah Valley. So if you'd like to get on that bandwagon, by all means, get a hold of me. 801-362-9552. 362-9552. Send us a note in the chat room. We would like to have Pamela Openshaw, on the air at least once a week to shake our brains loose because she's studying. She's just finished her first book. I would love to have her tell about it, but we're out of time. So let's find out if we've got a new guest or if we're going to continue. Thanks for being with us on Radio 1480 AM and on pat.utahvalleylive.com. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Are you an athlete looking for a natural boost to your workout? Have you studied up on the benefits of nitric oxide production to your performance? Then you'll want to try Kyani's Nitro Extreme. Nitro Extreme promotes cardiovascular health and improved blood flow, supports muscle contraction and relaxation, as well as nerve transmission. I use Nitro Extreme right before I lift weights, and I've never been stronger in my entire life. If you don't try Nitro Extreme, you'll never know what you're missing. Call 801-362-9552 to order yours today. That's 801-362-9552.
Hi, I'm Roger Strong. I'm here to tell you about tidbits of Utah County. No death, divorce, devastation, or destruction. Just good news for good people. You'll find us everywhere in Utah Valley. In doctors' offices, restaurants, mechanic shops, anywhere that people wait. We have over 35 features of fun, family-friendly entertainment. To find a paper or to advertise, call Roger at 801-616